Welcome to the Myth and Magic Authors Podcast, folklore and fantasy topics aimed at creative storytellers. To write stories and challenge your brain with exciting ideas, delve into these presentations and reflections. See how fantasy realms are based on actual world history, legend, and lore. Study fairy tales, nature fables, and supernaturalism to engage in a jumble of concepts that will trigger your fancy and get you writing imaginatively. Now, here's your host, Neil Mack.
Hello, listeners, and welcome everyone to a very special episode of Myth and Magic, because today I'm overjoyed to be celebrating 100 episodes. Today is the 100th episode of the weekly podcast, and we have over 5,000, nearly 6,000 listeners. And we have reached episode 100 on Wednesday, the 22nd of September, 2021. Hip hip hooray! So don't forget, the show goes out every Wednesday. And of course, it's created especially for fantasy fiction authors and any creatives who are involved in fantasy. And of course, for fantasy fiction fans everywhere. And I think in order to celebrate this centenary, I would like, if you don't mind, to go through our top 10 most popular shows. So, let's go straight in with our top 10 most popular Myth and Magic shows, starting at number 10. What is a witch? How to identify the different types of witch. That was Myth and Magic episode 41. Number 9. The Firbolg, Fomorians, and my report on celestial skyfish was episode 48. Number 8. Leptis Magna and Rathlin Island. That was episode 52. Number 7. Be like Bosch. Create insane monsters out of your dreams. Plus, I also discussed the curse of exoticism. That was episode 67. Number 6. Swords and Swordsplay, and how to use a talisman in your story, plus the real person behind St. Patrick. That was episode 26. Number 5. What is animism? Spirits within inanimate objects. That was episode 35. Number 4. The Yule Father, Sinterklaas, Zwarte Piet, Krampus, Christkindl, and also Psychopomps. If you want to find out what Psychopomps are, you'll need to listen to episode 17. Number 3. The Land of the Canty, the Reculver Tower, and Point of View in fantasy fiction. Find out all about Point of View in episode 21. And number 2. My interview with the amazingly talented poet and writer Ra Ariel. That was episode 90. And finally, number 1, the most popular show on Myth and Magic so far, is my interview with author Krista Wallace, episode 75. Look, we've covered a huge amount of topics together, and I'm sure we're going to be covering a whole lot more in the future. Thanks for choosing the Myth and Magic podcast. I'm wishing you lots of luck and lots of love and lots of success in all your fantasy projects. And thanks for following the Myth and Magic podcast. Take charge of your talent. I want to start with a quote. Lock up your libraries if you like, but there is no gate, no lock, no bolt that you can set upon the freedom of my mind. Who said that? Virginia Woolf. When I was a nightclub entertainer in the 1970s, yes, this was another of my less than healthy occupations, we used to organise spot prizes during the evening, and we'd hand out bottles of liquor or boxes of chocolates to anyone who might be able to answer a silly prank question. Prank question was like a joke, similar to a riddle, and the idea was just to get people to react and interact with each other and have some fun. One of my best jokes, and the word jokes is in inverted commas, by the way, was this. What do women do sitting down, men do standing up but using one hand, and dogs do on 3 legs? What do women do sitting down, men do standing up but using only one hand, and dogs do on 3 legs? After I asked that question, several members of the crowd would normally yell out things like urinate or make water or just piddle. But of course, no one ever won the prize because the answer is shake hands. Another one of these silly prank questions would be, I would say I'd offer a bottle of whiskey to the first man who could bring me the bust of another man's wife. And please forgive me, this was in the 1970s, and as you can imagine, things were bad back then. Anyway, after I asked that, several men in the audience would normally drag up a friend or a neighbour's wife, push her in front of me, and then say something tacky and probably quite puerile about knockers or boobies. And I'd declare that I was not talking about that type of bust, but thank you anyway. I was actually talking about the upper part of the human figure depicting a female's head and neck. I would then produce a large coin of the realm, normally a 50p piece, which boasted the bust of the Queen Elizabeth II, and I would say, this is an easy one, this one. I'm surprised nobody got it. These distasteful and embarrassing jokes are based on an audience's propensity and a willingness to compulsively prejudge a situation or stereotype an idea. Audiences always do it. They always jump to conclusions. All comedians will tell you that the mind of an audience is very dirty. They always think dirty. And that's because our prejudices run deep. So deep that we sometimes can't see them. Our biases are well hidden, and they don't come to light until a bad comedian like me tells a cheesy joke about busts or handshakes, and then our biases spill out and embarrass everybody. Judging from my posts and my comments, many of my listeners, you, the authors out there, are women. It's probably most of you. But here's a thought, and it's an important thought, and I'm not being sexist, I'm just telling you this as it is. Words are man tools. Man tools. I want you to think about this. The Holy Bible says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And God is a male character in this narrative, right? And the first human that this deity creates is, of course, a male. You couldn't get much more clear in my mind that words are man tools, because it even says that the Word was God. In fact, the Greek word logos, L-O-G-O-S, is also the name or the title of Jesus Christ, i.e. the Son of God in the Christian religion. And yet logos means, and you probably guessed it already, logos means word. And in fact, St. John described Christ as the Word that became flesh. Now, this isn't a religious discourse, so I don't want to get bogged down in religious details. But the history of the word, and the history of words on paper in particular, is very wrapped up, sorry about that little pun there, with Christian teaching. For example, Jesus Christ himself only allowed men to preach the gospel. There is a disputed gospel of Mary, but this has been downgraded by men who decreed that it was a non-canonical text. The first ever popes were men, and they always have been men ever since then. In fact, clergyman is another word for scribe, because a cleric is merely a clerk in holy orders. In other words, it's a male person who is entrusted to read and write the Bible. And this is how, for centuries, society described priests. It described priests as the people who were able or allowed to read the Bible. And that was because only men were considered to be authoritative and trustworthy enough to preach the Word of God, because the Word of God, of course, as we know, was handed down to Moses, another man, on slabs as words. We return again over and over to the word as a man tool. And it's assumed, wrongly, that William Caxton was the person who invented the printing press, although he introduced it into England in 1476. But it was actually Johannes Gutenberg who'd already printed the first Bible in 1454. And of course, printing press was used right away to print God's words. And of course, both printers, Johannes Gutenberg and William Caxton, were, of course, male. When the world's first feminist author, or truly feminist, there were some other good authors before her, but the one which springs to mind when you think about feminist authorship is Virginia Woolf. When Virginia Woolf began writing her loose interior monologues, she was very aware of the uphill battle that she faced, trying to write women's fiction but using man tools. And she said, "I would venture to guess that Anon, who wrote so many poems without signing them, was often a woman." She knew that her innovative thoughts and her ideas would be limited by the man tools that she had available to her and the man tools that she was expected to use. So today, I want you to be ruthlessly radical. I don't want you to think of writing as creating images with words. No, I want you to think of writing as creating images with thoughts. Think like Virginia Woolf. Think about writing as creating images with thoughts. Because it's the power of thought that matters most when you're writing. Those man tools are just an excuse, so ignore them. And I'll give you an example. You'll never run out of words. There are about 170,000 words in the English language. There are at least 6,500 other languages which are spoken today and read. So that's over 1 billion words you can use, and you haven't even started on all the permutations of all those words. There are infinite amount of words, so you can't ever run out of words. When you succumb to the condition that's, in my opinion, wrongly defined as a writer's block, you're not at a loss for words, you're at a loss for original thought. And we assume, don't we, that writer's block is a temporary failure to put words on paper. But in fact, it has nothing to do with putting words on paper. Words are just man tools. No, it's a temporary failure to get fresh ideas out of your brain. Or, as I prefer to call it, it's a failure to play with concepts. Imagine a book without words. Can you imagine such a thing? You ought to be able to. Because it's quite easy to imagine that, because we buy them in the stores every day. Fashion magazines, for example, are often plain, humble and modest in their literary ambitions, but they're compulsive in their use of sensational images, aren't they? And cartoon and comic books often don't need to use words to convey amazing ideas. Some of the most memorable things that I've seen in DC comics don't have any words at all. And children's early learning rag books are often just a series of bold pictures, yet the child becomes engrossed and reads the book over and over again. So it's a fact, books don't need words. Chew that idea over for a moment. Books don't need words. What they need are fresh ideas. They need viewpoints. They need moods. But books don't need words. And anyway, words are restrictive. I don't want to get into coding right now, but it's an important topic, although it's too big for this particular segment. But just to remind you, all of that rigmarole and all that bureaucracy, in my opinion, sucks the life out of your conceptual and your multi-dimensional thought power. You get bogged down with all that rules and you forget the most important thing, and that is that books don't need words. They need ideas. And I think that's where we get stuck. We obey all of those rules. We abide by all of those systems and plans, and we settle for what society or what the readers or even what our inner selves expect from us as the writer. And that will often mean that we will produce a hackneyed or a formulaic or even stereotypical piece of material, because that's what's expected of us. But we are losing our connection with our artistic brilliance, and we're forgetting how to be resourceful and how to be virtuosic. As artistic creators, because that's what we are, as artistic creators, we must break the creative yoke. And I'm using the word yoke, Y-O-K-E, here, as a symbol of oppression and a symbol of coercion, because that's what the mentors are. They are oppressing us and they are coercing us into becoming part of the hackneyed, stereotypical expectation of what a writer is. No, we must take charge of our talent. But how do we do this? Well, first, we must recognise that writing is not creating images with words. Writing is creating images with thoughts. Thoughts always come first. Without new thoughts, we don't have a prayer. Without new thoughts, we don't have a rhyme. Without new thoughts, we don't have a chapter. And of course, without new thoughts, we don't have a book. If you've ever reached the middle of a project and you've got stuck, it's not because you're at a loss for words, it's because you run out of ideas. And ideas matter. Let's take, just for a random example, Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, which I think is a good example. That story is loaded with great ideas. First, the author devised a magic ring, but he didn't just leave it at that. That was too easy, so he made a set of rings, and he gave men, dwarves and elves one each, and the rings were created by a dark and menacing force. And the protagonist, when he created the protagonist was neither strong nor magnificent, but he was insignificant and ineffective. And this hero, Frodo, encounters a reflection of himself during the story. And this is the bad side of his nature that he has to overcome. And then there's the mentor, Gandalf, who could be an angel or even could be a god, who as a prophet and as a priest and as a king could be an allegory of Christ. So yes, this epic fantasy is built on ideas. It's not built on words. It's built on loads and loads and loads of great ideas. Yes, the words are good. They're not great, but yes, the words are good. But what makes this epic so outstanding is the thoughts behind it. Now, you can participate in various different courses online and in real life that will teach you how to put words together to form coherent sentences. They will even teach you how to develop character and build plot. But there are not many courses that teach you how to develop ideas, and I think that's a shame. Because, as I say over and over again, what matters most when writing is the power of original thought. So, during the next few weeks, I will share with you some creativity exercises and some easy techniques on my social networks. And if you want, you can join me and have some fun. And you can break the creative yokes and take charge of your talent. Or, if you want, you can just peg away with those mentors. But if you ever find that writing becomes a chore, or you hit a mental block, you'll know where to come, because I'm going to carry on doing these creativity exercises with you. So I hope to see you all very soon on my Facebook page, which is author.neilmach, Neilmach, or you can find me on Facebook on my Myth and Magic podcast page, which is Myth Magic, MYTHMAGIC, podcast, PODCAST. I'll see you all soon, and don't forget, break the creative yoke, take charge of your talent.